Welcome to Alberta Conservation Association's Harvest Your Own podcast, the resource for everything hunting, navigating through the field, the butcher shop, and the kitchen. Life is all about great food. Let's get started.
Welcome to the podcast. I'm your host, Brad Fenson, an avid outdoor enthusiast who has worked as a freelance journalist, photographer, and public speaker for over 3 decades. I have hunted, fished, and foraged all my life and hope to share my passion for the outdoors. Along the way, I want to encourage everyone to harvest wild proteins and enjoy the satisfaction of providing the next meal for your family. Our goal is to educate, entertain, and inspire individuals to get outdoors and create a connection between food, health, and your future meals. Welcome to Harvest Your Own. Today we have a very interesting guest, a good friend of mine, Vince Aiello. And I best describe him as a motorcycle enthusiast, CycleWorks Calgary, if anyone's familiar with it, director at ACA, a member of Pheasants Forever, father, family man, hunting and fishing enthusiast, but most of all, a dog lover and trainer. Welcome, Vince.
Good morning, Brad. Thanks for coming.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about Vince and your outdoor pursuits. How did you get into all this stuff?
Well, really we started out as a kid, hunting and fishing with Dad. My brother and I, we know every gravel back road south and east of Alberta, and that's kind of how things started. Getting a little older, we got into cars and definitely a gearhead, but certainly later on in life, really headed back to hunting and fishing and conservation.
Yeah, but it all started as family out hunting and fishing and enjoying the outdoors.
Yes, very much a family pursuit. My dad being an immigrant to Canada, came here in the early 60s. Family was really important, and really that's where we all bonded. We were out fishing in the summertime, whether it was be a lake or a river, or hunting partridge and pheasants in the fall. And then a little later on, we got into big game, and so it was very much a family affair.
Yeah, those are my fondest memories of growing up too, is going out with my dad. And I surprise him over the years because I tell him a story. He says, "You weren't more than 4 years old. How do you remember that?" But it really does leave an impression on you.
It certainly does. And it wasn't even the sport itself. When we went out and got a big game animal and was hanging in the garage, and then Grandpa would come out, and then it was a Sunday afternoon, and we were, cutting up the meat and grinding it up and making sausages and porchetta and just all kinds of fun stuff that we learned when we were young.
Absolutely. And I get more enjoyment out of the processing and seeing a finished product than I do from the hunt. And that's a lot about what Harvest Your Own is about.
Oh, precisely. Absolutely.
Yeah. So when you grow up doing it, it's very special. And you've been a hunter since you were a young kid. I think you said your dad would send you into the bush with a .22.
Yeah. It's funny. I was our family's first bird dog. I got my first gun when I was 14 years old, as it was legal back then. It was a .22, and we would head into a coulee, and Dad would be like, "Vince, I think there's some bush rabbits in there." And so off I would charge into the bush, and pheasants would flush out, and they would harvest the pheasants, and then it was my job to run around and pick them up. But then they soon discovered my nose wasn't very good at finding wounded pheasants.
So did you grow up having dogs?
Well, yeah, shortly after that, we kind of realized this would be good to have a dog. And so my dad worked in South Calgary. He was a carpenter, and he would stop by the shelter every day. And lo and behold, there was a Springer Spaniel there one day, and he brought it home. And that was our first bird dog, and he was an amazing dog. And we didn't know a lot about training then. It was just kind of turning him loose and trying to keep up with him. So when he flushed the birds, we were in range to harvest. So.
Did it change your idea of hunting or the enjoyment of it?
Oh, absolutely, 100%. Very, very early on, it was a really changing focus because it was fun to watch the dog. Prior to that, it was all about, looking at the landscape and where might a pheasant be hunting, and that was still a big involvement. But then it was just watching the dog and the moves, and they would turn and keep an eye on their tail when they got excited. And we actually learned more about the birds themselves and where they hang out, because the dogs would really show us all those areas that they hung up, whether it was their beds or whether, paths to the feeding areas that they would follow. It was really neat.
Yeah, it's interesting because I've written lots about different strategies for hunting big game. And, when you don't have a dog, you have to look at the habitat and assess it, the time of day, where the food is. But I guess dogs are a telltale sign.
Oh, absolutely, 100%. And it's just really amazing how much they can garner from the world through their noses. And sometimes it's hard for us because we just don't have that sense of smell. And then early on, we kind of learned a scent cone, which is what's a scent cone? Well, when a bird is sitting there, you can kind of think of it as smoke, and the scent of the bird is just kind of floating down around the ground, and you can see a dog pick that up maybe 30, 40, even 50 yards away if the conditions are great, and follow that in to find a bird. So it's kind of cool. So in my mind's eye, I would always like, okay, the dog is on the scent cone, and I could almost see that to where the bird was. Yeah,
that's a good way to visualize it.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, you had your first dog, it changed your hunting. Did it increase your success rate?
It absolutely increased our success rate. But more importantly, because I wasn't that good a shot when I first started shotgunning, it really increased our take-home rate. So we were able to find wounded animals and bring them back home. There were lots of times where, I think back then the pheasant limit was 3, and you'd shot 2 and you wounded a third, and you spent all afternoon looking for it, and then we would just call it a day. It was like, we're done with pheasants today. The bird's definitely dead, and we would move on.
It always amazes me how a pheasant can hide.
Oh, so amazing.
Yeah, and sometimes what I often do is I'll leave the site and come back to it an hour later. And I remember one pheasant I did that. We looked for 45 minutes, couldn't see it. We went right back to the same spot an hour later, and I looked down, and 6 inches from my boot was the pheasant in the grass. I'm like, how did I miss that before?
There it was. And they're so colorful, so you think they'd be easy to see, but in fact, the color is actually what camouflages.
Yeah, and they can flatten themselves to the ground and hold tight like nothing else.
Pretty incredible.
It really is. So, yeah, the dogs would definitely change that game. Have you always had a dog since then?
Yeah, since then, we've always had at least one dog in the family. And even when I left home and I met my wife, Anita, she had a small pup. It wasn't a hunting dog, but we had a dog in the family. And then soon after that, we had a hunting dog. And we've always had 2 dogs beyond that. We found out that having 2 dogs in the house is actually easier to take care of than one, because they look after each other, they play with each other, and they have that companionship all day long when you don't happen to be there. So it's definitely a lot easier.
It helps keep them content.
100%.
Interesting. Never thought of that before, but it does make sense.
Yeah.
So you had a Flushing dog, a Springer Spaniel?
Yeah, we had Springer Spaniels growing up. And at one point, my dad had brought home a Brittany Spaniel from the same shelter, and we turned him loose on our favorite hunting grounds, but I didn't know what a Brittany was at that time. And this dog was gone off to the next horizon and flushing birds, and he wasn't very well trained, but we soon learned what is known today as an all-age dog. Those dogs are designed to run way ahead, find and point a bird, and allow you to get up to it. But this dog didn't have any training, so eventually it ended up at a friend's farm. But as I reflect later on in life, I kind of understand what that dog was doing, and I wish I had a little more knowledge, because then we could have put some more training into it,
right,
and had a really great pointing dog, which led me to about 20 years ago get another pointing dog, my first pointing dog on my own, which led me down an incredible path.
Yeah, so what you're talking about is really understanding the different breeds, how they work, how they pursue the birds, how they enhance your hunt as a hunter, and more to understand their instinct so that you can train them properly. Is that a good way to put it?
Absolutely, Brad. It's funny, in doing research for dogs, they're all sporting dogs, but they're all have different methods of finding birds. And even what we call the flushing breeds, which are designed to find a bird and flush it so you follow in closely behind them, even within that, the dogs act differently in different aspects. So, for example, there's one breed that follows a foot scent. Springer Spaniel is really good at following a foot scent, so you'll find them with their nose right on the ground and they're following a trail, whereas perhaps a lab is looking for more of a body scent, so its head's up in the air. So even though they're still flushing breeds, they work very, very differently.
Yeah, so anyone interested in getting into dogs or having dogs for hunting really needs to do a little bit of research to understand their specialty, because I would call each dog a specialist in terms of what it does, and they can all do different things to enhance your outing depending on your hunt styles, the habitats that you're going into, and perhaps even your hunting buddies, what they have for dogs or don't, or their style of hunting.
100%. When I first started researching dogs, Brad, it was off to the public library and reading as many books as you could. And so we're lucky today because we can get online and watch videos and see all types of content to help us make those decisions. But certainly having a friend, or if you don't have a friend, finding out what the local clubs are. And once you've made a pick or an idea of what you want, and try and go see one work in the field at an event.
Yeah, and that's pretty easy to do. And I think it's pretty safe to say is when you get into hunting dogs, breeds that are meant for hunting, there really isn't a bad one. You just need to understand its characteristics and qualities.
100%. That is so true, Brad.
This podcast is produced for Harvest Your Own, a program dedicated to those who want to reconnect with food and health through their experiences outdoors. HarvestYourOwn.ca is a resource for individuals to learn more about hunting and the outdoors. There's information to get you started and ensure that your compass stays pointed in the right direction to be successful. Where's your next meal coming from?
You know, when we look at, if you want to use the word equality of a dog, some dogs require more or less of a percentage of scent to find the bird. So a really good dog, for example, might only need, as an example, maybe 2 or 3 or 4% of that scent cone to be able to locate the bird. Another dog may need 20 or 30%. Not good or bad, just different.
Right. And understanding that allows you to really hone in on the species of dog that is best suited for you.
100%.
Now, that leads to the question, what do you have now?
Well, what I have now is a very rare dog. It's called a Blue Picardy Spaniel. And for those Trekkie fans out there, Captain Jean-Luc Picard was from northwest of Paris, where these dogs come from. So I had a friend that had one. Interesting story. I had sold him an ATV, and he had an acreage just south of Calgary and High River, and we were sitting on his deck one day. And he had bought this quad because he was a long-distance shooter. So he was target shooting at 1,000 yards, and his optics weren't that good. So he would drive over and change targets and come back. But we were sitting on his deck after I dropped this off, having a cigar and a rum, and he had a pond out back, and the pintails were flying in. It was sunset, looking at the sunset, and this dog was sitting between us with his legs crossed. And I just was a beautiful sight. It was almost like one of those Redland paintings that we see.
Right.
And it just, that kind of affected me. And so my first dog was a Blue Picardy Spaniel. So, my first pointy dog.
Right. Love at first sight.
Love at first sight.
Now, what are the characteristics with the Blue Picards?
Well, the Blue Picardys are a pointing dog. So they were established in the late 1800s. The Englishmen were coming over to the French moors to hunt, and they would leave their English setters with the gamekeepers. And in Europe, the hunting and the pointing breeds are very, very regional. So the French gamekeeper had what was a Picard Spaniel. So that was their version of an English Springer. It was a flushing dog. So someone decided, let's put these two dogs together. So to visualize it, a Blue Picardy would be like a black and white setter as opposed to a white and black English setter that we're used to, but they have the long traditional Spaniel ears.
Oh, nice.
Yes.
Yep. Have you stuck with the breed?
I have since then. So there's probably about 120 in North America right now. Through the war times, in that particular region in France, war rushed through in one direction and back through the other direction, and people were just leaving their farms and their homesteads, and they almost lost the breed. They were down to almost 20 dogs. So it's taken them a while to rebuild, but lo and behold, we've got dogs all over the world now, and they're really gaining favor. They're wonderful dogs at home. They're really, really calm. They're very smart, and they want to please, but you turn them loose in the field and they're just beasts.
You know, it was a question I was going to ask you. Is it possible to have a hunting dog and a family dog?
Absolutely. But there's where your breed research really comes into play, because some dogs are all hunt and they're nervous and they might not be as good a home pet with kids or whatnot, whereas some breeds are a lot more casual and very, very good at home, but then that might not be as good a hunting dog. So you really have to look at what you're doing with the dog. How much time are you spending with hunting, and how much time is it spending at home with you and your family? So that's another consideration.
Absolutely. So your dogs, they can cross their legs when they're laying down, watch the pintails come in. They got beautiful long ears, interesting coloration. What are the hunting qualities that appeal to you that made you pick that breed?
Well, really, all I wanted was a hunting dog, Brad. Yeah. And so I got this pointing dog, and because I really wanted the pointing aspect. I was starting to get older, and honestly, a pointing dog might be a bit of an older man or a lazy guy's game, because really you can turn your dog loose in the coulee and sit up top and watch him run the bottom. When he goes on point, you're like, okay, there's a bird, and then you can walk down and go look at it. Or if you're running a little farmstead, the dogs can, do a loop around, and if they find some huns, great, and if not, off you go back in your truck and down you go again. But I didn't really know about how to train a pointing dog. And so I got online and I discovered there was a club in town, the Calgary Pointing Dog Club. So I looked them up online, and they had a seminar, and they brought this guy out. I didn't know who he was. His name was Ronnie Smith. And they had a week-long seminar. So I joined it, and that started my forte into the pointing dog world.
Yeah, and you had mentioned that earlier, is find out your local dog clubs. go out and look at the different breeds. You might have a pointing dog or retrievers or all the different genres of dogs and handlers and how they deal with things.
Yeah. And, you know, that's a really important point, Brad, because I talk to a lot of hunters nowadays, and we talk about the field trials that we do in the spring here. And the guy's like, well, I don't want a field trial dog. I want a hunting dog. But in fact, we're all hunters. And ultimately, we're not doing a lot with our dogs in April, May, and June. And so that's kind of field trial season. And it's a sport, and it's fun, and you meet some wonderful people. Dog people are just absolutely fantastic, and it crosses so many genres. Our club has got doctors and lawyers and carpenters and police and firemen and bricklayers, but we're all there together as a community. But more importantly, we're just there to keep ourselves and our dogs in shape. You know, back in the old days when we had our springers, they would just, they're family dogs, and they would sit around, and then September 1st, we would turn them loose in the field, and we would expect them to act like athletes.
Right.
But yet the dog and I had put on an extra few pounds. And so this is a great opportunity to keep them in shape, not only the bodies, but their minds. Birds are the most important thing to develop a dog.
Yeah, I think it also keeps that relationship of you being in charge and them listening.
Yeah, you know, it really is teamwork.
Yes.
You know, you can see it a lot of times at the trials when a dog goes on the ground, he does his own thing. They're still fantastic dogs, but there's not a lot of teamwork. You can see the dogs that are really close and connected to their handlers or their owners. Those are the dogs that win very well because they've got that really great teamwork.
They spend a lot of time together.
100%.
Yeah. Is it possible to have more than one handler? Could you do that with one of your kids or your spouse?
Yeah, absolutely. And we see that quite a lot. There's a lot of families and husband and wives, and we have some interesting conversations back at camp. Who's the better handler, the wife or the husband? And sometimes the ladies have a different way of handling dogs. It's a little more gentle, and some dogs really respond to that. But on the other side, there's some knuckleheads out there that need maybe a little deeper voice or
Right.
a little more direction.
Some firm direction.
Right, and some breeds are like that as well.
Yeah, it's interesting because my next question was going to be, does the dog tell you who they prefer to handle with?
Oh, 100%. You know, we talked a little bit earlier about Ronnie Smith and his cousin Rick Smith. These guys are the grandfathers of pointing dog training. They're known all over the world, really, and they come from Big Cabin, Oklahoma. But Rick always says dogs are the best trainers of people. They know how to get what they want, and they're insistent. You know, little things like you've probably seen it if you own a dog. You're sitting on the couch watching a hockey game, and your dog is nuzzling you because he wants you to pet him. Right, and little things like that.
Their instinct is incredible.
Yes, they're bred for this. Pointing dogs are bred to be out in the field. Flushing dogs are bred to be out in the field, and that's where they're happiest.
Yeah, and you need to understand it, right?
Yes.
When you're talking about the dog actually trains the handler, you have to first look at that instinct and see what that dog can do without you interfering.
Right, and developing that, really. And that's all you're doing as a trainer and a handler, is taking that instinct and developing it further. You know, a pointing dog is not dissimilar to a coyote or a fox. I'm sure you've all seen the videos where they're creeping up and trying to catch a mouse and they're pointing. And so, but effectively beyond that, they're pouncing and catching their game. So now we're taking that instinct and we're stopping it there. Because a pointing dog, for those of you who don't know, they find the game and they hold. And it's actually the hunter's job to flush the bird. So your dog will remain still. You walk ahead of it in the brush, try and locate it, flush it, and shoot it. But it's also very safe environment because the dog is generally behind you. Sometimes the flushing dogs are in front of you. And so when a bird jumps up, you have to be really careful, because if the dog jumps up after it,
Right.
you want to wait a few yards before you take a shot. So pointing dogs, I find, are fantastic for mentor hunting and teaching young kids. And I do a lot of mentorship stuff because it's really a lot of fun to watch a kid walk up behind a pointing dog, get in front of it and flush a bird and harvest maybe their first bird.
Yeah, it's a very controlled situation.
Correct.
You know, when you think back to the early days with your dad and shooting pheasants without a dog, it has zero control.
Right. Especially when I was in there chasing bush rabbits and there's shots going off around you. Yeah.
Yeah, and I did have the pleasure to hunt with you last fall, and I would say that you get more enjoyment out of watching your dog than pulling the trigger.
Oh, 100%. It's so exciting to watch them, and it's just so much fun. You know, you get to a point where I almost don't even need to shoot a bird anymore. And a lot of times I'll go out as what we just say, a handler with other folks or with new people. And as long as I'm out there and my dogs are running the ground, I'm having fun. They're having fun.
Right.
That's the big thing.
Absolutely.
This podcast was made possible by Alberta Conservation Association and the Harvest Your Own community. If you're interested in harvesting your own food, there's a comprehensive collection of information. To gain insight and knowledge, head to the field, harvest your own protein, prepare it, and taste the results. HarvestYourOwn.ca is a library of information from getting started and geared up to processing, butchering, and cooking wild game to make the connection between health and food.
You know, it's funny because I have hunted a few times with people with poorly trained dogs or no training, and it is a major frustration.
You know, that is an excellent point. You know, a half-trained dog, if you're out there in the field and hacking it all day long and yelling and screaming, it doesn't make for a very fun day.
No.
And so the other thing that we have to consider when you're looking and researching and ultimately buying a hunting dog is this is going to be a companion for 10, 15 years, right? Knock on wood. And so you want to put that training in early so you can really enjoy each other through that long period of time.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, what I always realized in those days when I was afield and things weren't working, it's not the dog's fault.
No, it never is.
No.
The handler error is what we call it. I mean, that's probably the biggest thing that happens. It's generally the handler that messes up. There's so many ways you can mess up a situation, and the situations are all different. But
right.
Ultimately, we're trying to give our dogs the best advantage possible.
Yeah, and that brings me back to learning how to train. There's some excellent books and resources out there. YouTube nowadays and the Google machine has stuff that we never had access to when we were learning how to hunt.
Oh, 100%. 100%. And it's really, really important as well, because when you look at Alberta, I mean, there's a lot of dogs, a tremendous amount of dogs, but there's not a lot of professional dog trainers. Don't get me wrong, there are quite a few, but typically, you know, all the superstars are all down in the US, the guys that are running trials and you know, they'll have 30 or 40 dogs in a kennel. And that's why they're pros. When you're handling, you know, 10, 20 dogs a day or a week, you garner so much more information, and every dog you learn. And it's tough for us. We might have one or two dogs when all of our frustrations and all of our successes come with that one dog.
Yeah, I've seen that firsthand. I did a pheasant hunt in South Dakota with a dog kennel, and they had, I think, 25 dogs. They trained them for other people. But the one thing I also noticed, and they pointed out, is every dog is unique and has its own personality and works a little different.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, you know, when you embrace that, they work together in the field. You look at one that shines in terms of finding a bird in thicker cover, and one that's better at flushing, one that actually does the retrieving, and to see them work together is like a symphony.
Exactly. And you put a really good point together. We've got some absolutely incredible bird dogs at finding birds, but they're not the best retrievers. Right. And there's some dogs that do it all.
Yeah. So again, like researching the breeds is really important. Joining a local club, does that, it's not critical, but is it important? And did it take things to the next level for you?
Oh my gosh, Brad. If someone had just told me that, and I hear this so often, you know, I don't want a field trial dog or in the club situation, but it really is a community, and everyone is there to help each other. And so that environment, and you ultimately end up garnering some new friends. We've got a little training club. I have a great friend in Didsbury, Tom Doherty, and he raises and breeds Brittany Spaniels. And we're closed on Mondays at dealership, so I'm up every Monday in Didsbury, and we call it Manday. And so it's a great day, and we're just training dogs, and we help each other out, and we've got a couple of other folks and ladies. You can't believe the amount of ladies that are coming into sport. It's incredible. And we're all just helping each other out so we can all succeed.
Right. So finding a club is beneficial. It's going to help with your training. It's going to give you a network. It's going to give you a community. It's going to give you a reason to get out there.
100%. And for all the genres, we've got 3 pointing dog clubs in Alberta. There are Springer Spaniel clubs. There are a few Labrador clubs. Even within the pointing world, there's NAVDA that has a club situation where you can go train dogs. And so there's so many resources out there for us.
Right. So, I mean, anyone thinking about getting a dog, there's incredible resources in our backyard. There's places to go and look and watch before you make a decision. Make an informed decision.
Right.
Because this is going to be your best friend for a long time.
Right. Absolutely, 100%.
Yeah. The
other thing that it does, too, is it kind of opens your eyes. You know, you're looking for places to train and run their dogs, and we've got some incredible resources with the ACA and the Border Fish and Game Association and all those public properties that we have access to. Just a matter of hopping on the website and dropping a pin and seeing where that is, and going for an investigation and a walk around that day. Because dogs need to see different environments and different situations. So the more places that you go to train a dog, the better the dog becomes.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring that up because I still like going to pheasant release sites.
Yes.
I don't have a dog, so I burn a lot of boot leather is what I say. And some days I don't see a pheasant.
Right.
But, hunting with you last year, we were in a place, we didn't see any birds until we started working the dogs.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, and they
Right.
found them.
And that's why they call it hunting, right?
Yeah. What are your biggest rewards from your dog? Like, what do you like to see with your particulars?
Oh, it's funny. It boils down to, Brad, specific moments. And, my friend Tom and I, we call them Stanley Cup moments. I can remember with my first dog, Holly, incredible pointy dog, Blue Picardy, but she was not a good retriever. And we were at a release site, and it was early November, and there probably was only an inch of ice on the pond around the lakeshore that we were at. And I shot this pheasant, and it kind of flew over a little bit of water, landed in some cattails. And I walked to the edge, and I quickly discovered there's no way I'm getting across this ice. And I looked at the pheasant, and I thought, oh, darn. I looked down at Holly, and she literally looked at the pheasant, looked at me, looked at the pheasant, looked at me. She walked across the ice, picked up that bird out of the cattails, and brought it back. And that was her very first retrieve. And that, for me, was a Stanley Cup moment, and that will always be etched in my memory.
That's pretty special.
Yeah.
Yeah. So your dogs retrieved some birds for me last year.
Yes.
Put them up.
Some of and dogs are so individual. Sage, my female now, she's an absolute monster retriever. We were, most people don't believe this, but we've got some video. She was 5 months old, and we were shooting chucker over her, and she was retrieving them.
That's pretty special.
So yeah, she's pretty incredible. Yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes dogs don't always do what you want, even when they're trained.
Most of the time, they have their own minds,
right?
And whether it's you want to go left and they want to go right, but ultimately, we talk about that handler error. And when something happens, we always look at each other and like, trust your dog.
Trust your dog.
They have the nose.
Yeah, and that's what I was getting to. Is it's usually not the dog's fault. It's because you've been inconsistent or got away with something that it wanted to push the boundaries. Or there's all those little nuances that you can learn rather quickly if you're already dealing with people that have trained dogs for their whole life, or even just one dog they've learned by their mistakes.
100%. And you hit the nail right on the head. A dog is a pack animal, and they need consistency. Consistency. And that's really what trains them. And because you're trying to communicate with your dog. I think a dog can learn, I can't remember what the number is, like 18 different words and commands that they'll do consistently. But if you're not consistent, they're confused.
Right. That you're creating the confusion in their mind.
Right. Handler error.
Right. And then I won't call it a mistake. Then the frustration happens.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. And not only us as handlers or hunters are frustrated, the dogs get frustrated. Because they don't know what you want, and they really want to please.
Yep. And is it often, can you just stop in a day and take a 5-minute time out and water the dogs and restart, and they get right back to normal?
That is exactly what we do. And here again is the advantage of having two dogs, Brad. Number one, when you got two dogs, you can hunt longer. You don't have to wear your dog out. So, for example, we'll put one dog down, and if you're having a bit of an issue, you can go back to the truck, water him, put him up in the kennel, grab your other dog, go hunt for another hour, and then come back and come at it again. And it's amazing how quickly their attitudes will change just by chilling out for a while.
Yeah. Having dogs, being part of a training club increases, I'll call it your hunting time, because you were in field trials last weekend.
Yeah. So we were down in Montana. There's a self-gun series that I run down there called Nastra, and they melt off a little sooner, so they start their season in March. But again, it's just to keep the dogs tuned up and me tuned up, and it's a self-gun series, so it's a lot of fun. So your dog, finds a bird and points it, and I get to flush it and shoot it, and there's two judges, running around on quads following you, and you're gaining points. And if you have a good season, you get to earn yourself a big shiny silver belt buckle, just like the Cowboys. It's fun.
Pretty nice. What are your words of encouragement or considerations that you tell people thinking about getting into this?
Well, one of the biggest things that we see in people that buy bird dogs, especially their first dog, is they get frustrated because the dog is not doing what they want. And so that if you don't curb that early, it could create a very difficult relationship. And it truly is about finding someone or some help or a trainer that can help you with your dog and really get that communication going. And I think that's the most important thing that I could say is if you're struggling with your dog, look up a club, find a trainer, someone that you get some advice, just change direction.
Right. because it's your understanding that is probably causing the frustration.
100%.
Yeah.
Both ways.
That's great advice. What's your favorite thing to hunt?
You know, my passion has always been pheasants. Growing up, you know, the Hungarian season always started early, so we started hunting ducks and Hungarian partridge, but it was really special when we got to mid-November and hunt the pheasants and the coolies, and that's always been my passion, and that's led me down another road as well through conservation. I'm the past president of Pheasants Forever Calgary. I do a lot of work with them over the years in grassland conservation, and that kind of got me involved with the ACA, Alberta Conservation Association, and sitting on that board, and all work that I'm just really, really proud of. And it's been a family affair. You know, my daughter graduated from university, and she's now at the Calgary Zoo in the conservation education program, so that always puts a smile on my face.
No doubt. Well, thank you for your commitment, because people like you that step up actually make a difference for all of us and our resources.
Yeah, well, thanks. And, you know, besides the dog clubs, there's so many other organizations, Brad, as you well know. I would just recommend to get involved and put some boots on the ground and do a mentor hunt, whether it's Alberta Fish and Game or Alberta Hunter Education Instructors Association. They have some wonderful programs, or Pheasants Forever, or now any of these organizations. And you get to a point in your life, you know, when you've hunted for 50 years and you want to give back, and it's a real fun way to do that for the resource and for young folks.
Yeah, and sharing it with other people is a reward in itself.
Oh, big time.
Yeah. You know, I watched you working your dogs at the novice shoot at the Taper Pheasant Festival last year, and people were coming off that line with birds in their hands with permagrins. Like, you could not wipe it off their face no matter what you did.
That is my favorite weekend of the year. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I have to ask this question, harvest your own. What's your favorite pheasant recipe?
Oh, you know, Brad, there are so many. I don't know that I have a bad one, but you know, when my girls were really young, pheasants were like, "Oh, Dad, we have to eat that pheasant." And it wasn't so much the idea of eating a pheasant, but these were birds, you know, that were beautiful, and you know, they're sitting in the garage before we clean them. But so my wife developed this early on recipe, almost like a chicken finger. And to this day, that's all they want. They just absolutely love that. It's just really simple fillets, you know, salt and pepper, and cooked in butter on a cast iron fry pan.
Of course.
And that's kind of my favorite for sure.
Oh, that sounds good. Well, thanks for sharing your information, your knowledge, your passion, and your commitment to the outdoors. I think it's pretty special.
Well, thank you for coming in today and allowing me to share those stories.
We hope to inspire people to reconnect with nature and appreciate where your food comes from by harvesting your own. For more information on getting started, or to learn specifics about the Field to Fork experience, visit harvestyourown.ca and follow on Facebook and Instagram. Check back often for new material, recipes, and videos that are posted regularly. Please subscribe to Harvest Your Own podcast and take the time to rate and review the show to help us build a dedicated core of passionate hunters as our regular audience. Until next time, embrace the outdoors and all it has to offer. Thanks for joining us.